Shocking showdown. Diane Keaton as epic takedown of Jimmy Kimmel leaves Hollywood speechless. Hold on to your seats because what you're about to hear is no run-of-the-mill celebrity interview gone wrong. It's a heart-topping, jaw-dropping clash that rocked the entertainment world to its core. Picture this: Diane Keaton, the Oscar-winning legend whose charm and talent have dazzled audiences for decades, steps onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage expecting a warm, respectful chat. Instead, she faces a talk show host armed with arrogance and a smirk ready to tear her down for cheap laughs. One folds isn't just a tense moment. It a masterclasses in grace, power, and standing up to a bully. By the time Diane walks off that stage, head held high, she leaves Jimmy Kimmel speechless. The audience stunned and the internet buzzing. This is a story of how one of Hollywood's most beloved icons put a late-night host in his place. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single word. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment with your thoughts and let's dive into this unforgettable showdown. The drama kicked off the second Diane Keaton walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live, said she was there to promote her latest film, a heartfelt drama about aging gracefully in Hollywood, a subject she knows intimately. After a career spanning over 5 decades, the audience erupted in applause, their warmth reflecting the love and admiration they had for the cinematic legend. Diane, with her signature quirky charm and radiant smile, settled into the guest chair, ready for what she thought would be a fun, meaningful conversation. But Jimmy Kimmel had other plans. So Jimmy began leaning back his chair with a smirk that seemed more mocking than playful. "I got to ask about this new movie of yours, another film about getting older in Hollywood. Are we like running out of ideas of you?" The words hit like a punch, sharp and unexpected. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the edge in his tone. It wasn't the usual light-hearted banter you'd expect from a late-night show. It felt dismissive, almost disrespectful, especially for someone of Diane Keaton's stature. Diane's smile wavered, but she held her composure like the pro she is. "Well, Jimmy," she replied, her voice steady but warm, "I think stories about women of certain age are incredibly important. We don't see enough authentic portrayals of what it means to age as a woman, not just in Hollywood, but in society as a whole." Her response was thoughtful, measured, and reflective of her deep understanding of industry she's navigated for decades. But Jimmy wasn't having it. With a wave of his hand, he brushed off her answer like it was irrelevant. Sure. He said, his tone dripping with condescension. "But don't you think audiences want something a little more exciting? I mean, how many times can we watch Diane Keaton play the same character?" The words hung in the air like a challenge, and the studio fell silent. This wasn't playful teasing. This was a direct jab at her entire career, and it stung. Diane's posture stiffened, her famous warm cooling just a fraction. "I'm sorry." The same character, she asked, her voice carrying a sharp edge beneath its calm exterior. "Jimmy, I played everything from Annie Hall to a mob wife and The Godfather. I've done comedy, drama, romance, thrillers. What exactly do you mean by the same character?" The audience held their breath, sensing a shift in the room. Even the band members behind Jimmy's desk exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't a fluffy, feel-good interview day. We're used to Jimmy realizing had stepped into dangerous territory, could have backed down, but instead he doubled down, his ego clearly in the driver's seat. "Come on, Diane," he said with a forced chuckle, "you know what I mean? And neurotic, quirky, trying to figure out her life is like your brand." At this point, the audience gasped softly, the silence growing heavier. His words weren't just dismissive. They were reductive, boiling down a career of incredible range to a lazy stereotype. It felt personal, and it felt mean. Diane took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Jimmy's when she spoke. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying away someone who'd face far worse than a smug talk show host. "Jimmy, I think you're confusing me with characters I played early in my career. But even then, reducing any performance to a stereotype shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what acting as." A studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and wasn't just defending herself. She was schooling him, and everyone could feel it. Jimmy, clearly rattled but unwilling to admit it, rolled his eyes dramatically for the cameras. "Oh, here we go," he said, his tone mocking. "Are we about to get a lecture on the craft of acting? Because Diane, I got to tell you, our audience doesn't come here for acting classes." It was a cool jab designed to make her look pretentious, for Darren to defend her work. The audience cringed, and even Jimmy's writers in the control booth were probably sweating bullets, wondering how to salvage this train wreck. But Diane Keaton wasn't fazed. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze never wavering. "You know what? Jimmy, you're right. Your audience doesn't come here for acting classes. They come to see their favorite celebrities treated with respect, to learn something interesting about the people they admire. But it seems like you're more interested in cheap shots than actual conversation." The words landed like a thunderbolt, and attention in the room was electric. Jimmy's producers were likely in full panic mode, but he just laughed, a forced nervous laugh that did nothing to hide his discomfort. "Diane, and just asking the questions everyone's thinking," he said. "Try to regain control. Let's be honest. When was the last time you did something that really surprised people? When was the last time you took a real risk?" That was the moment the interview crossed a line. You could see it in Diane's face the exact second she decided she had had enough. Her jaw tightened. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a woman who'd spent decades proving herself in a cutthroat industry a real risk. She repeated, her tone icy, but controlled. "Jimmy, I've been taking risks my entire career. I took a risk when I chose to age naturally in an industry that demands women stay frozen in time. I took a risk every time I chose a complex, flawed character over a simple, likable one. I took a risk when I kept working past the age when Hollywood typically discards women." Jimmy tried to interrupt, but Diane held up her hand, and the gesture alone silenced him. "But you know what the biggest risk was? Coming on shows like this and trusting that the host would treat me like a human being." Now the studio was so quiet you could hear the hum. The cameras. Jimmy's face went from smug to visibly uncomfortable. But he wasn't ready to back down. "Look, Diane," he said, his voice taking on a condescending edge that made the audience cringe. "I think you're being a little sensitive here. This is comedy. This is what we do. We poke fun. We have a laugh. Maybe you've forgotten what it's like to not take yourself so seriously." The audacity of that statement was staggering. Here was Jimmy Kimmel telling Diane Keaton, a woman who built a career on comedy working with legends like Woody Allen and Nancy Meyers, that she didn't understand humor. Diane's response was purized, sensitive. "Jimmy, there's a difference between comedy and cruelty. There's a difference between poking fun and being deliberately disrespectful. And there's a huge difference between a joke and what you've been doing for the last 5 minutes." Jimmy shifted in his seat, his carefully curated TV persona starting to crack. He was losing control of the interview, and he knew it. "Oh, come on," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "You're really going to sit there and tell me you can't handle a little ribbing? This is Hollywood, Diane. If you can't take the heat, if I can't take the heat," Diane interrupted, her voice now burning with control fire. "Jimmy, I've been taking heat in this business since before you knew what a television camera was. I've dealt with directors who screamed at me, producers who tried to intimidate me, critics who dismissed me, but you know, I've never had to deal with hosts invited me onto a show just to tear me down for entertainment." The band leader stared at his hands. The audience remained silent, and even Jimmy's usual sidekick seemed to vanish in the conversation. This was a one-on-one battle, Wills, and Diane was in complete command. Jimmy tried a different tact, flashing what he probably thought was a charming smile. Diane looked. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over? Tell us about your new movie." But Diane wasn't buying. "No, Jimmy," she said, firmly, "we're not starting over because this is exactly the problem. You think you can say whatever you want, hurt whoever you want, and then just reset when becomes inconvenient for you. That's not how respect works." The word respect landed like a gavel, and Jimmy's mask slipped entirely, dying. "With all due respect," he set his tone, betraying his frustration. "You came on my show. This is my house, my rules. If you don't like how I run things, maybe late night television isn't for you anymore." The audience gasped. The suggestion that Diane Keaton, a woman who'd been entertaining audiences since the 1970s, somehow didn't belong in modern entertainment was so breathtakingly arrogant it left the room stunned and sat back in her chair, and for a moment she just looked at Jimmy with something that might have been pity when she spoke. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of her entire career. "Jimmy, do you know how many talk show hosts I've sat across from my career? Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, Ellen DeGeneres. Every single one of them understood that their job was to make their guest look good, to create a moment of connection with the audience, to celebrate the work and the person in that chair." Jimmy tried to interject, but Diane pressed on, her voice growing stronger. "But you, Jimmy, seem to think your job is to prove how clever you are at someone else's expense. You think entertainment means making your guests uncomfortable, making them defend themselves, making them smaller, so you can appear bigger. Jimmy's face was turning red. Now is carefully maintained TV. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Subscribe for more powerful video.